Well, hey there, guys. I'm Max the Beast of ZeldaDungeon.net, and I have an interesting topic for today. I want to talk about the desolation in the Zelda games, but also winter in the Zelda games. Now, these are two different themes that I'm actually going to explore a little separately, but you'll see by the end, hopefully I'll make it obvious enough, how they're very related. First of all, Zelda is a fantasy series, and one thing about fantasy that is definitely a significant part of it is seeing things that you can't see in the world that we have, our real world. And that includes regions. There's always fantastical regions in fantasy stories. Now, Zelda has always been a little more of a grounded fantasy, at least in terms of the locations you go to. I mean, with the exception of some buildings and stuff, some of the architecture, and of course with some exceptions in the actual, environments, most of the areas in Zelda games are often kind of, there's something you could see in the real world. Now, I think this is something that they should change a little bit. I'd like to see some crazier locales, but, that's not the important part. What I really want to get into here is that's worth a topic for another video, but I can cover that on another day. I want to talk about this right now. The Zelda games have had desolate areas before. Now, I'm not talking A Link to the Past's overworld where there was just wilderness and there's not a lot of people around, because there are people in the villages. I'm not talking a whole game being no people. What I'm talking specifically is very particular regions where they're desolate. Like, a good example is actually the Haunted Wasteland in Ocarina of Time. Not the Gerudo area in general, specifically the Haunted Wasteland, where there's sandstorms all the time, and visibility is low, there's nothing around, it's just nothing. It's death, really, all around you. This feeling of desolation made it a very unique area, and while they didn't really capitalize on it that much, it was a very intriguing, prospect to explore in an adventure video game. And if they were to apply that to a larger area, it could be pretty interesting. These areas are very unique, and they provide a very interesting sense of, it's just frightening, the idea of being isolated. The desolate region is both frightening and just excites a sense of adventure, because there's nothing around to tell you where you are. There's much more of a raw exploration factor where you're just like, I wonder what's in this direction, or just wander until you see something worth checking out. The idea of having a Twilight Princess-sized Hyrule field with almost, expanded into a actual area of the game, this kind of region where there's perhaps lots of caves to explore, or you have to find out how to navigate this region without getting lost. These are all ideas that could be employed. And, you could expand it into other kinds of desolation. You could have it that you're in the woods and there's nothing around, just completely isolated. You could have it that you're in snow. And there goes the other point of my video, winter. There's a scarceness of winter themes in the Zelda games. Arguably, pretty much the first time that there was ever any ice theme in any Zelda game was A Link to the Past, in which there was the Ice Palace. And this dungeon was simply an ice-themed dungeon. There were some frozen parts around it in the Dark World equivalent of Lake Hylia, but pretty much it was just that one dungeon. Now, that was the first instance of the ice themes, really. And, in Ocarina of Time, you had the single mini-dungeon. There was nothing really in Link's Awakening. And then, there was Frozen Zora's Domain, but that was just like a curse on an existing area. It wasn't exactly an ice region. And then you had the Snowhead in Majora's Mask, in which there was a whole region, and this is where they really started doing it. They had a full area that was it was ice themed. It was winter, and then it was an unnatural winter that you got rid of by defeating the source of the unnatural winter, which was the boss of Snowhead Temple, Goat. Now, since then there was one ice island in the Wind Waker. Excuse me. And in Twilight Princess, you had an ice region, but it was actually really just sort of a straight shot. There wasn't any exploration. It wasn't any real, anything like that. It had a great feeling of isolation, but it was an incredibly short area. It was essentially a linear path that you could only get through with the right items or right, point in the game. But it was a linear path to get to the next area. It wasn't anything impressive. It was just that thing. But they handled the sense of isolation quite well. In a way, the Gerudo Desert in the game was very similar. The desert is a similar kind of isolation. It's a wasteland. There's nothing there except one particular element. In this case, sand or heat, and in the winter case, it's snow and ice. It's a very similar idea, deserts and wintry wastelands. So, the idea of the barren wasteland is something that they could use a lot. There's just nothing there. You're wandering a while and there's just nothing. And they could populate enough with enemies and other things to make the gameplay not boring. I mean, you could easily make that boring, and obviously we don't want that. Another thing is that in a lot of stories, if there's going to be an element that is evil, it is usually either fire or darkness. Now, fire is an oftenly commonly used thing for the final areas or the most dangerous areas in the game. Even in Zelda titles, often, or at least the ones where Death Mountain was like the last area, there's often lava on the mountain. I mean, like A Link to the Past, Death Mountain's like one of the last regions you visit in the game, or the Dark World equivalent anyway, and there's lava pouring down the cliffs. Or at least you can see some lava, at any rate. And, this is carried on in a lot of games, including Mario with Bowser's Castle, etc. And, even in the Wind Waker, Ganon's Tower's lowest floor had lava. And, it's just lava is in the bad guy's headquarters. Now, the thing there is that, don't you think ice is should be legitimately considered as being worse? I mean, in Norse mythology, Ragnarok is the predicted end of the world, in which basically the Earth is supposed to be destroyed in, if I believe I've got my facts straight, fire and ice. They're equal forces of destruction. They're equal forces of loss of life. I have this Magic the Gathering card here, Icy Manipulator, that actually has this quote on it. I don't know where this comes from. They probably made it up, but I think it kind of brings together my argument in a very good way. In fire, there is the spark of chaos and destruction, the seed of life. In ice, there is perfect tranquility, perfect order, and the silence of death. Now, as you see what it's saying there, fire may be destructive and, chaotic, but it's an element that has life to it. In fact, that is light. If you're going to say, bring in light and darkness as elements, fire is light. So the elements that are considered good, I mean, the fire is considered evil, and darkness are considered evil, but light is considered good, and ice would be considered good, yet ice goes with darkness because of lack of light, lack of heat, and fire goes with light because light and fire, fire creates light. That's mainly where it comes from. So they have these mix of themes. There's no reason fire shouldn't be evil. So that's another way you can use the winter theme, and even the desolation theme. What about a story similar to Twilight Princess in that the land is covered in some kind of evil, but it's an abnormal / dark winter in which the entire game is a snowy landscape and it's, desolate, but once you, defeat the evil in each region, it uncovers, the land beneath, spring comes, kind of like Majora's Mask, and it's not as desolate. There might actually be towns and stuff to deal with. I mean, that's the desolation theme, but it's also kind of the Narnia thing where there's this evil winter. I don't understand why the winter thing can't be used, and it goes so well with the desolation idea, which I also think is underused. Zelda could really stand to use these kinds of ideas more often, especially since it hasn't overused them. It has used both of them very little. There's very little cases of desolation in any Zelda game, and usually they're brief, too brief to really be that desolate. Whereas the winter themes, they're also kind of rare, and only have recently come into heavy use. Spirit Tracks, the most recent Zelda title, probably uses winter as a theme more than any other Zelda game, because an entire fourth of the world map is made of winter. Now, maybe you could say that about Majora's Mask too, but it's a smaller fourth, and I wouldn't quite call it a fourth. There's a little more that, isn't. I guess that's really my main point. I just think these themes go together, and I think there's a lot of things that you can do about it. I mean, winter could be used for other things, other ideas, themes. I mean, you could have a Christmassy type theme, without having actual Christmas, by easily having a kind of community or village or area with hardworking people who, in some way or another, care about each other greatly and look after each other. That's a Christmas base emotion and feel that could be applied to, a mountain village or whatever. There's all kinds of other things, like roads covered in ice between normal villages. You know, there's all kinds of other ways you can use the winter theme. I'm just talking about it in relation to this desolation thing. I think it's interesting. Now, I want to hear what you guys think. Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you think about these ideas. Any criticisms of my points or anything. What did you think of the video, etc. I'd love to hear what you guys had to say. I really do read your comments usually, so I will definitely read them, of course, this time, and I would like to hear what you say. I'll respond if I can. So tell me, and I'll see you guys later.